Good evening, class, and welcome to another exciting episode of How to Google Exciting Photos from the Internet and Modify Them in Photoshop. In today's assignment, we're going to do 10 different techniques using the blur tool in Photoshop. So, what's better than the summer sky? It's already got plenty of blur and creative colors, but let's make it worse. So we're going to pick an image somewhere from the web. Of course, I'll cite it in the comments below. Yeah, it looks like he's having a radical time. It's not like a lot of color variance in that picture, so let's go look for another one. Boom, flowers. Everybody likes flowers. So we're going to go ahead and just drop that into our space here using copy paste. Wow, it's really small. Hang on a second. So actually, here's a better background image, and it's from a self-help site, which I really like. So, let's just help ourselves. Copy that image, drop it into Photoshop. Bam. Crop it down because it's actually a little bit smaller than the default Photoshop size. But that's okay. Everyone knows how to use the crop tool at this point. We'll throw that one as a little bonus. I'm supposed to show 10 techniques, but now you're getting a 10 and a half. Enter, save it. Didn't really do it very nicely. We'll redo it again. Good job. You should be proud of yourselves. All right, we're almost there. So now the thing we want to do is we're not going to look at the additional layers or background. We're going to be looking at layer 2, which we cropped out. And we're going to divide it kind of into 10 different sections so we leave ourselves enough space to manipulate the image. It's important to make sure that we selected layer 2 as we edit it and go to our different filtering layers. So today we're just going to do an average blur. Looks fairly average. Make sure we comment on that so that we know that it's an average blur. And I would also recommend that you reduce your font size. I like using pink just because it always contrasts the image behind it. And it won't ever get kind of mushed into the image that we're trying to edit. But that's an average blur. The other one we want to go ahead and add to our image is let's go ahead and try maybe a radial blur. Something a little more intricate that shows off the powerful tools that are in Photoshop. So we're going to go to blur, look at our radial blur, and make sure we don't have the text selected, otherwise we'll get that error that it's trying to also blur my text. We're going to go to blur, radial blur. Choose the amount of blur that we want, and blur. And then we're going to add some text. This says radial blur. We don't forget what we just did, because that's what I would do. Also, this was instructed in the lesson, so that's also why we're going to do it. Let's go to our next one. Make sure we have the text deselected. And we're still modifying the pixels on layer 2. And go and add some noise. Noise is just the random granulation behind the image. It gives it sort of a film grain effect. And make sure we label that as noise. Likewise, selecting another image and making sure we're not modifying the text layer that we just input. We're going to add another kind of granulation, which is larger. And we'll be adding dust and scratches. We can also, again, choose the number of pixels and the threshold that it will modify. Seeing that we have more of a granulation, how it's actually blurring out over the fence image there below. We can add this as dust, as part of the dust filter in Photoshop. The next layer we'll do here, just in the very corner, is our 5th layer on the top. We're going to want to sharpen the image. Again, making sure that we don't have our text layer selected, otherwise it's going to greatly impact the amount that we're trying to work on here. As you can see, it's actually sharpened and darkened some of the shadow lines around the image. That's another great tool when working on family photos. We'll label this as being sharpened in the top right hand corner. Now, referring back to the original assignment that has been assigned here, I believe we're only demonstrating 8 different techniques. We usually, like we do every single week, we'll be selecting 8 different creative techniques. So sort of like the teacher's instructions, I was leaving space for 10 different images. But what's great is this means that we now have more real estate and we can skip steps on the bottom. So we're going to divide this into 3 because we're only going to be demonstrating 3 more techniques to reach our requirement for this lesson. So here down at the bottom, we're going to be stylizing it and making it look like an oil painting. Again, being careful not to select the text like I've done 4 times now, so that we don't have to keep going back and reselecting the item. We're going to be oil painting the bottom. It'll let us see different layers of stylization, cleanliness, scale, and we can even angle the lighting in this oil painting. Here at the bottom, now it looks like an oil painting, and we'll label that so that we know that it's an oil painting. Magnificent. Now we'll also do the middle section right here. Again, selecting layer 2, which we're editing the pixels on. Going to the filterization layer, make sure that we render it as clouds. This is what it would look like as an ugly red and green watermelon cloud. From the 2 colors that we have selected in the color picker on either the bottom left-hand side or the top right-hand side. And then by reversing this process, we could go back to black and white if we so chose by adjusting those colors in the bottom right-hand corner. We could filter them and do a cloud renderization. And we'll go ahead and label those as rendered clouds if you were to be adding clouds to your image, which could be interesting if you want to get a different mood effect out of the lighting. And last but not least, let's select one more filter for the bottom right hand, the 8th selection here. Making sure we've selected layer 2 to modify the pixels on that image. We'll be stylizing it. No, actually, let's go back to our blur gallery and select the Gaussian blur, which will be sort of a regular uniform blur over the entirety of the image, which is slightly different than the average blur, as you can see, which sort of blended the entire thing and normalized the pixels inside of it. The Gaussian blur is more of a photo lens effect, and we'll label it as the Gaussian blur. This will also help you do assignment 6 if you haven't done so already and are turning it in late. And make sure that we go ahead and save and export our image. You can do that by hitting File, Save, and from here you may also save the image to the Adobe Cloud if you so choose, since we're all using that subscription, but here I'll be saving it locally. And with the date. Thank you all for watching. Don't turn your homework in late.